All right, good morning. I'll say it again, good morning. Okay. I'm gonna give you guys a little education right here. That was a preparatory command. Okay, and so you guys follow with the execution, so we'll get started if you do that very well. Good morning. Good morning. All right, good job. Hey, I'm Mike Black, and Vice President for Defense for AFCEA International. We have two back-to-back sessions this morning in here. We're going to start with a keynote from the Deputy PEO, C3T, and the Army Futures Command cross-functional team. And this session is going to be followed by a network modernization and data centricity to enable the Army of 2030, featuring representatives from First Corps. And we're going to be recording these sessions. for those that aren't able to be with us today. So let me start off by just introducing the two folks from our keynote. It's my pleasure to first introduce Nick Sachs, the Army Deputy Program Executive Officer for Command, Control, and Communications Tactical. Mr. Sachs has held acquisition positions at various Army organizations since joining Army Materiel Command in 2005. As acting Deputy PEO C3T, he guides a workforce of more than 1,600 personnel, supporting over 50 Army acquisition programs and efforts, including the development, acquisition, fielding, and support of the Army Tactical Network. Okay, and joining Mr. Sachs this morning will be Brigadier General Promotable Jeff Ray, Director of the Network Cross-Functional Team at Army Futures Command. General Ray is a native of St. Thomas, U.S. Virgin Islands, and he has served in, listen to this, okay, there'll be a test on this. He has served in the Army as enlisted, warrant, and officer positions, okay? And if you're tracking, okay, I said he's promotable. When he has his ceremony at the end of or beginning of September, it will be his 17th promotion in the United States Army. Obviously a graduate of Army Candidate School and was commissioned into the Signal Corps. And as Director of the Network Cross-Functional Team, he is responsible for driving the fusion and continuous improvement of the network, command and control, communications, and intelligence to enable mission command across the tactical network. Now, there's a thing that we say when we are ready to get started, and right now we are ready to receive. Some of these Walker folks know what I'm talking about, but General Ray will probably elaborate on us being ready to receive. So, Nick and General Ray, the floor is yours.
Thank you, sir. Mission accepted. President's en route. Got it. Who? Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? All right, sir. Thanks for the introduction. Truly appreciate it. Thanks for the opportunity to speak today. My partner in crime, we're going to hopefully present to you what we believe the future of the network needs to look like, act like, feel like at the end of this discussion, and then we'll answer a few questions. But we'll pass it off to the PEOs, and then we'll come back to you immediately after that. But I know it'll be continued to talk about. But thanks again for the opportunity to speak to you today. I heard the warrant officers. I didn't hear the NCOs react. I didn't hear the officers react when General Black kind of laid it out. So I'm going to try that again. So for the non-commissioned officers and NCOs in the house, are you here? Who? Okay, let me hear the warrants. Who? Okay, let me hear the officers now. Who? Okay, I got all three. I'm good. I'm feeling good now. Nick, we can get started. All right. Hey, look, hopefully what Nick and I will be able to present to you today is, again, what we believe. I'm the what when it comes to designing of the future tactical network, which eventually will become the enterprise, the unified network with General Morris and myself. So, I'll stand by. Okay, can you hear me? Yeah, they're good. I'm good. I'm all set. Okay, hopefully, again, what we're going to try to give to you today is what we believe the future network looks like between what General Morrison and I are trying to do with creating a unified network. So the unified network, let me speak about that first, right? So there's a broken line, a logically broken line between the tactical and the enterprise. And therefore, that's what we're trying to achieve, is how do we blend those two together logically so we have a seamless connection between the both of those. And we are in a network-centric environment today, and we want to move to data-centric. So how are we going to do that? So there's 4 things on that board up there that the network cross-functional team, the what, is trying to do. And Nick and the PEO C3T is the how we're going to get there, and our other partner in crime, Mr. Welch, is the art of the possible, of how we can achieve that goal. So the number one thing that we believe is a priority is to remove complexity off the transport and improve the transport so we can move data. And how we'll do that is have a transport agnostic environment. We no longer want a single path to move data. We want multiple paths, and we want that to be automated. That's the first priority that we need to achieve in order to move data in the manner we need to. The second part is that if data is a priority, which it is across all of our services, the second priority is to move to a data-centric environment. And our secretary has said that data centricity is her second priority in the Army, and we need to achieve that goal. So what is data centricity? Well, it's a couple of things. One, it's an environment where we're moving from network-centric, having, before just taking servers on our backs everywhere that we go, and trying to create the environment where we have cloud instances that we can actually reach data. But it's a little more than that. We have a lot of sensors out there, and we have to make sense of what those sensors are collecting. And so there's a requirement for a data fabric to help us make sense of that information. So that's the second part of data centricity that we require, is something to make sense of that. The third thing that we need is a multi-level security architecture. Today we have disparate instances of SIPR, NIPR, and JWICs. We need to have an environment where we can move that data freely between all our classifications, even down to sensitive but unclassified. Those who are on the X and are trying to execute on target. And that's the reason why we need that multi-level security across the board. And the last part of it is to achieve cyber dominance, we have to bake in cybersecurity early. The network cross-functional team in PEO, we're going to partner with ATEC, the Army Testing and Evaluation Command, to bake in cybersecurity, looking at those vulnerabilities earlier in the process. Not after we have put it into the hands of the soldiers. We want it done before that. So those are the four priorities of what we believe the future network requires in order for us to achieve dominance on the battle space. And I'll pass it to Mr. Nick Sachs to see if he has anything to add as he moves to the next slide.
Sir, I think, is this on? Yeah, okay. I think you captured it. Thrilled to be here. Thank you everybody for coming out to hear us this morning. Sometimes the faces might change, but it's still the same partnership between the CFT and the PEO as far as modernizing the network. As General Ray mentioned, we look at the CFT to provide us the what, and on the PEO, we kind of say how we're going to get there. So I think you laid out very clearly the what of the future network. And if we jump to the next slide, we can get at kind of how we're getting after that in some instance. So the slide here represents our capability set 23 roadmap, kind of an update on where we are. You've probably seen something like this before. We are about 3 years into the capability set process. We have a great deal of momentum executing the capability set process from design through fielding. What I'll tell you up front, I have a little bit of a love-hate relationship with this chart. Maybe that's too strong. Maybe it's like dislike about it. What I don't like about the chart is it's only showing you what's happening with Cape Set 23 right now, when in fact our teams collectively are really engaged in 4 separate capability sets right now. Capability set 21, 23, 25, and 27. In capability set 21, we're actually right now actively fielding our final unit, our final Cape Set 21 unit, and we're gonna wrap that up toward the end of this fiscal year. When all is said and done, we will have fielded capability set 21 to 8 different BCTs, 6 different ESBEs, and 2 MDTF units. In addition to that, so that's the ITN Cape Set. In addition to that, so far in FY23, we've touched over 300 units, giving them modernized network capability in some form or fashion. So we've been very active getting capability out to the field. Regarding specifically CapeSet 23, you can kind of see where we are as of today. We finalized the design back at the critical design review in about March, April of this calendar year. We're right now in the middle of a two-phased ops demo with 2CR. We've completed phase 1 of the ops demo. We have another phase to go in the second quarter of fiscal year 23, and then we're already prepared to move on from the prototyping portion of CapeSet 23 into the rapid fielding portion of CapeSet 23. So we are poised right now to hit the ground running in FY23 fielding the CapeSet 23 capability. What I'll say is this: CapeSet 23, we're pivoting. We're starting to pivot toward the division as unit of action. What are those capabilities that are needed at the division level, and also at the division enablers outside of the BCTs to enable that division to be a unit of action. And we're also expanding more into mounted formations than we did in CapeSet 21. So we're starting to make that pivot. We're excited about the capability we'll be able to get out to the field in FY23 and FY24. Sir? Oh. I'll just point out I'm not a signal guy. And my
Thanks. All right. So yeah, thanks, Nick. And so the capability set. So we're also moving into 25 and 27. That'll take us into that automated pace that I spoke about earlier about the transport portion of it. Is how we want our pace to be automated. So as we move into 25 and 27, that's where that's going to take us. So next slide, please. So what I wanted to do is take an opportunity to talk to you. I had an opportunity to go down range. I'm going to keep it in the on-class portion of this, but I wanted to explain to you some things I saw and some things that I had opportunity to do my update to the secretary and want to kind of give you a little bit of feedback on what we saw. So we did see a lot of the equipment that we have fielded in CapeSet 21 being utilized downrange. What we did see, which was really important, is we saw two things. One, we saw a lack of training, and I'll explain that. But then we also saw Fifth Corps that actually had the gold standard for training on all of our legacy equipment, things like the WinT and others. And they are the gold standard. I must tell you that we were extremely impressed with that training. But on the backside, after I look back at a year being in the seat as a network cross-functional team director, I laid out, just paint a picture for you, 70, 29, 1. Just keep those numbers in your head. I'm going to walk you through them. So 70%, when we halted, fixed, and pivoted for the network, most of you remember that, I equate the 70, 29, 1 to that same thing. So 70% of our equipment in the Army is legacy equipment. We'll just equate that to our legacy equipment. 29% between the PEO have fielded about 29%. And then there's a 1% that we're trying to do what we're here at this conference about is emerging technology to try to get there. But underlying all that is a training deficiency in my mind because there's three disparate pieces of equipment we're trying to train our forces on. Our legacy go to war, our modernized net-nef training, new equipment training, new equipment fielding, and the emerging technology, the shiny objects that everybody wants to put their hands on. So what do we do about it in order to modernize better? This is where the help from industry is required, right? So that 29%, we're trying to raise that number. I'm trying to divest of the 70% and use the emerging technology to invest into the 29% to modernize. Using the programs that Nick will tell you that are already in place and use the emerging to inform those to make them better. So when we talk about those 4 pillars, that's the help we need on the emergence side, that 1% to inform the 29% so that we can increase it. And we'll work as things increase, we'll divest and therefore free up the funding required in order for us to get there. 70, 29, 1. We need the help on the 1% to inform the 29%. You can ask me questions on that when we get back around to it. But that's one thing I wanted to share with you. The other thing is for the mission partner environment. This is a key thing. I think at 12:30, CENTCOM is here today to talk about the mission partner environment. I had an opportunity to, when I was the sixth there, to kind of lay the foundation for where they were going. The team took it and ran with it. I think they're going to come here and try to explain why the mission partner environment is so important. And I'll tell you, why is it important? It's important because a couple of things. One, a place like CENTCOM had 17 bilateral connections to their individual partners. All the other theaters have equally the same problem set. INDOPACOM does. In Europe, they have the same problem set. But again, they also have one additional part, which is the NATO portion of it. But they're doing a tremendous job, but they still need the help from industry on how we're going to get there. So how do I believe we're going to get there and where the help we need? Identity management and credentialing is number one that we need in order to achieve anything where we're sharing information with joint services or our partners. If we can tackle that, we'll be good. The second thing is attribute-based access control, and then we're going to do the small s and standardize and how we're tagging information in order to also retrieve it using attribute-based access control. So you'll hear probably a little bit more of that at 12:30 if you want to listen to CENTCOM talk about that today. But they are moving out, and they are far ahead, but we still have a lot of work to do across all the joint services and our coalition partners. And then the last piece, that 1% that I talked about, ATM on core, and that's why First Corps is here. They're the two that really lives in that 1% from the experimentations. And those disparate things that they're doing is what's informing our modernization today. So again, you can save your questions, I'll answer those, but I just wanted to give you a little bit of feedback on what we saw happening downrange. But they're actually doing true data-centric environment at 18M on core is where we need to push the Army and all of our services towards. Nick, over to you.
Yes, sir. I'll just add. I'd be remiss because we don't specifically call it out, I think, in these slides. But we're talking the feedback we got from Europe here. We're getting feedback from multiple theaters. So we're partnered fairly closely with First Corps. We're working with them on a number of initiatives in the Pacific to make sure that we're learning lessons on what their unique challenges are in that theater and how we can help them with their distributed mission command. And also, as we have a number of units that serve as Devops partners for a number of our programs that are helping us select the right capabilities, the right ConOps moving forward with a number of things like CPI2 or Mounted Mission Command, whatever it might be. There's a number of ways that we're looking to get user feedback, and our industry partners, I think, have been very helpful in taking that feedback and adapting their solutions to meet what the user needs. We can go to the next slide. A brief synopsis on what we're doing for Capability Set 25. As I mentioned before, we're working 4 capability sets simultaneously right now. We're working the design right now of Capability Set 25. Bonus points if you can read all the words on the diagram there. It's a little bit of an eye chart, but even being here close to the screen, it's hard to make them all out. But basically with the capability set construct, what we're doing is providing incremental network improvements over time, and we've shot for every 2 years to make those incremental improvements. So I kind of touched on it a little bit yesterday, and the joint PEO panel was trying to keep that door open so that new technologies that may not have been ready for CS 23, but they're ready for CS 25. They have insertion points that we can get that new modernized capability into the formations, and we always have a way to on-ramp more technologies if we can. A few things I'll point out here specifically. I won't read the whole right column. You guys can take a look at that, but we're pivoting to the division capabilities. What does that division need? What do the division enablers need in order to be able to act as a unit of action moving forward. Working on, and there's going to be another slide after this one, I don't want to double dip, but continuing to converge the network and warfighter functions, so that unified network of the enterprise and tactical, continuing to move toward the unified network, and continuing to collapse warfighting functions into the mission command stack to make things simpler. We're looking to improve our use of the hybrid cloud. It's something we're still trying to figure out. There's a lot of experimentation and we're getting a lot of feedback from units on what's the right mix of cloud. You know, we can't be solely dependent on cloud. We can't be solely dependent on on-prem. So what's the right mix of what units need locally versus what they can get back from the cloud? What's the right way we're going to fight utilizing that capability? Continuing to move forward with the expeditionary mission partner environment based on software-based cross-domains. I think in the future objective end state for us is we get out of the business of having hardware cross-domain solutions. We want to be able to share data across those security boundaries or keep the security boundaries separate without having to have a box there to do it. So where's that software solution? Is it going to be ready for CS25 to start cracking away at that software-defined cross-domain solution to enable us to be more expeditionary in our mission partner environment? And finally, the command post CPI-2 program, making the command post more mobile and survivable. We're continuing to move forward with that. I think we're going to initially start fielding our CPI-2 increment 0 within capability set 23, but capability set 25 should be where we're pivoting to that increment 1 solution. And all of this is to kind of lay the CAPE set process is kind of building the infrastructure to continue improving the tactical network infrastructure, the unified network infrastructure, to be able to take advantage of what we're calling big bets. And so what are those technology shifts or capability shifts that are really going to move the needle and allow us to really move forward in our capability? I think General Ray will touch on a few of those.
Yeah. So our Undersecretary challenged the team with presenting to the industry and our partners and everyone else our big bets. So these are some of our big bets. You heard me talk about the first one, a network that's resilient, it has auto pace, it has bandwidth virtualization, and so it can aggregate where we're trying to move our data on the fastest path or the most resilient path. Unified operations is under the construct of a unified network. You'll hear General Morrison talk a little bit more about that. That's end-to-end, ability to see ourselves, know our network, the health of it, and everything else. That's where this all plays in. And securing data, you heard me talk about that. This is, if I could say across all services, ICAM is key. Everyone knows it. We must achieve that in order to share data, not only with our partner, our own services, but also with our joint and coalition partners. We must achieve identity management. That's where we need all the help. That's that zero trust environment. We want to know who, we may not know who you are behind the curtain, but we know your credentials and we know your attributes. And therefore we'll let you in. Today, we secure at this transport layer. That data is just sitting there. If someone piggybacks in on an individual and they get to the data, it's all theirs. We have to reverse that process. Remove complexity off the transport and secure at the data layer. That's the future, but we can't do it without identity management. I often make, the analogy of you're going to walk out of here, you're going to pick up your cell phone, you probably have a kid in college, you're going to open up that bank app, you're going to do identity management, credentialing on it, and it's going to know who you are. It's going to open up your bank account. It's going to have your checking data, your savings data. You don't want to see the one on how much you owe on your house and your loan data and everything else, but it's there. But my data is also in that repository, but you don't get to see mine because it knows your attributes. And then you're going to trust that connection and you're going to send some money to your kids. That's where we need to be. I mean, that's the best analogy I can give to you. And the other analogy I'll give to you is how important it is with our sensors. Our network needs, today, our sensors kind of report on a passive. We go to our sensors, we check them, we say, oh, maybe somebody has been in our network or not. That's another challenge for everyone. Our sensors need to be actively reporting to us. I'll give you another analogy. You're on an airplane. You're flying 34,000 feet in the air. The cargo door comes open. You want that pilot to know that. And his sensor's actively reporting to him in that cockpit that it's open, or that an engine is failing, actively reporting. And then he or she can react. Right now, folks get into our networks, and passively, I find out. I was a G3 Army Cyber. I know that. I know. They would come to me after the fact to tell me the things that were happening. And I charged them with getting to a point. I charged CENTCOM the same way when I was there, and I'm charging again as I sit in the seat as a network cross-functional team director, that our sensors on the network need to be actively reporting. And then we're going to move from boxology. Some of you heard me talk about it. I've been in the Army about close to 4 decades, and we're still building boxes. That's why we're going to move to a modular open system architecture on where we can change the way we utilize our radios in our hands and on vehicles and everything else, in aircraft. And we want that modular open system, that swap capability. And then, like I said before, the data fabric is important to be the catcher's mitt for all those sensors, from intel data, fires data, and it makes sense of it and find the best shooter to hit that target.
Yes, sir, I'll just a couple points of emphasis on securing the data. Really, that's as you mentioned, sir, that's a key foundational thing that we have to get right. And I think there's a direct correlation between securing data and network resiliency, because the better job we can do securing data, the more network transport options we have to move that data. So we're less reliant on a specific niche type of transport. And looking across all 5 of these big bets that we're working, even though this is the PEO-C3T network CFT specific session, all of these cut across multiple PEOs within the Army. So this isn't something that PEO-C3T, from an acquisition perspective, is trying to do on our own. We have our partners in multiple PEOs willingly coming along on this ride with us, and also with all the warfighting functions, the whole community. And not just that, but as we work through all of these capabilities, we're making sure that it's open in a way that can share with our joint and coalition partners. So it does us no good to secure our data through ICAM if we can't then share that data with our coalition partners or our joint partners. So as we work through this, it's a large group working these problems, and we're all moving and rowing in the same direction to make sure that our solutions are compatible with each other. We're not duplicating solutions where we don't have to. So it's a lot easier said than done, and if you have a group of 5 people working on a project, it can get complicated, and there's a few more than 5, but we're rowing in the right direction and making sure that we get something that's not going to pigeonhole us somewhere, but we're going to be open and secure and able to fight together as we advance some of these big bets. I'm going to slide. So I think this is our get off the stage slide. It's a shameless plug for our next TEM number 9 down in Nashville. So I hear Nashville's beautiful the first week of December. So hopefully you all can join us. I think as of now we're looking to talk capability set 27 down in Nashville. I think we're also going to talk some of the capability set 25 design goals. Don't lock me in on that. There's still a little bit of time for us to change the agenda based on, frankly, what kind of feedback we get this week, and also probably what kind of feedback we get between now and at AUSA. There's some time to shape depending on what kind of interest we see and where we see some potential technologies. So if there's a specific topic you're hoping we cover, please let us know. But you have the website there for registration, a little bit of the purpose. If you've been there before, I think they're a really good experience and a good opportunity to get together and have some good exchange, both government to industry, also industry to industry, on kind of where we're going. I'll just remind you, this is an odd-numbered TEM, so we have odd and even. Odd numbers is more of a information flow back and forth. The even number TEMs are the TEMs where we ask for white papers, so we won't be doing that. There's no plan right now to have this be a white paper TEM, more of an information flow. Sir, I don't know, do you have anything else to add?
Thanks, Nick. Turn it back over to you. Thanks, everybody.
Well, Mr. Sachs and General Ray, first, thank you for taking your time to join us today with these insightful remarks and the what and the how. Definitely appreciate that. And the 70, 29, and 1, I think you leave us with something to remember by, and also the emphasis on auto reporting. In lieu of a speaker gift, we're going to make a donation to the Fort Gordon Historical Museum Society on your behalf. Now we're going to jump right into the next session, but I will say that both Mr. Sachs and General Ray are going to be around for that, and so when we get to the question portions of the panel, they'll be here to assist as well. And while I'm talking about questions, let me just say that when we get to that, we'll turn those microphones on back there. Please, it's best if you use your thumb to press the button if you have a question. When it's green, we'll talk into the mic and not away from the mic. So talk into the mic so that you can be heard. So again, jumping right into the next session, that's going to be led by Justin Eimers, a public communications specialist for the PEO C3T. And at this time, I'm inviting the panel forward. I'll talk briefly who Justin is, and then he will introduce his panel. Mr. Eimers has been a public communications specialist for PEO C3T since 2017, and he's also served in the same role at Tobyhanna Army Depot and holds a bachelor's degree in mass communications from King's College. So, Justin, I'll turn it over to you.
Hey, thanks, Mike. Give us a second while our panelists come down and we figure out the chair situation down here. All right, well, good morning and welcome, everyone. Again, as Mike mentioned, this is kind of a follow-on panel to Mr. Sachs and General Ray's comments. And what we're going to do here is kind of pull the thread and dive a little bit deeper on some of the items that they talked about, really getting after data centricity and enabling the Army of 2030. I know that we're bridging the lunch hour here. We are certainly mindful of that. I think we've got a lot of good content to share. And I think that the panel here is looking forward to the audience Q&A to keep you all engaged and to keep us on our toes. Before we dive in, I do want to take a minute to thank AFCEA for setting this up year after year. It's always a great venue, and I know it's a huge effort. So appreciate all your work to set it up, and to the Georgia Cyber Center here and the City of Augusta, always great hosts. So appreciate the hospitality. I think this community is so well suited to support these engagements as we kind of bring our problems to the table and collectively get after solutions. As we bring the Army network problems to the table, not our own problems, we'll take those home with us. So by now, it's obviously no secret that the Army is moving out on data centricity. You just heard Brigadier General Ray and Mr. Sachs say that it's one of our big bets, but what are we doing about it, and what are we already learning? The importance of reliable, accessible data to those that need it at echelon has been proven in recent CENTCOM, Europe, and Pacific operations. Mr. Sachs mentioned the feedback that we're getting from those activities, and resilient network transport from the edge to enterprise is a critical enabler to support those data-centric priorities. The Army is continuing to leverage experimentation and Project Convergence, and again, operational exercises in Europe and the Pacific to inform kind of the network modernization and what that means for data, and paired with innovation from soldiers, that's not only driving, but it's accelerating modernization and data centricity. So to add some meat to that framework, we have a panel of experts here that will, like I said, kind of pull the thread a little bit deeper to talk kind of from their perspective and areas of expertise, how they see data and its relevance there. So just quickly, I'll introduce the panelists here. To my right, a dynamic duo from First Corps, the G6 and G5, Colonel Liz Casely and Colonel Adam Sanderson. Further down the line is a tag team from PEO C3T, two of the project managers, Colonel Shane Taylor, PM for Tactical Network, and Colonel Matt Paul, the PM for Mission Command. And finally, down at the end, as Brigadier General Ray always says, part of the what, we've brought the what to the table here as well, Mr. Nihar Patel, the Senior S&T Advisor for the Network Cross-Functional Team. So with that, we'll kind of spend about maybe an hour or so just talking here at the table, and then we'll open it up to the group here for some audience Q&A. So, ma'am, I'll start with you. We just heard General Ray and Mr. Sachs talk about data centricity as a critical network modernization priority. From your perspective, how are you approaching data centricity from the First Corps and Pacific Theater perspective?
Okay, microphone check. Here, great. Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here and to share some of our experiences from First Corps. First Corps is looking differently at how we operate in the Pacific. I won't go too deeply into the concept, but the concept that we are focused on is distributed operations. Distributed operations causes us to disassemble our headquarters into multiple nodes and move forward into the Pacific, where we have some cross-functional capability of warfighting functions in each of the nodes. Scale and duration is the variable there. This is something that we're working through. But the battle rhythm is the thing that actually keeps us tied together from a standard. And then the network is required in order to move information back and forth in order to enable commanders' decision-making across multiple time zones and across vast distances. An incredible problem for us to solve. I owe it to my dynamic duo, other battle buddy here, for putting that together, but a great concept for how we might contribute to the warfighting concept in the Pacific. From a virtual space, the way we break it down inside of the Corps is asking questions that are central to understanding what the network must look like in order to support this type of operational concept. It starts first with understanding the decisions that need to be made. And I know that we talk about this from a very conceptual wave top process, but inside the Corps, what we're doing is we're assembling a decision support matrix to understand what decisions need to be made, by whom, where that decision maker is, what that decision maker requires to make decisions, what's the timing aligned to that, and that timing could mean anything. It could mean frequency, sequencing, it could be anything. It could be dynamic timing too as well, things that are unexpected or not anticipated. The battle rhythm synchronizes all of this. And then as we deconstruct and disassemble all the warfighting functions and place them in different nodes to certain degrees, how do we reassemble all of that data in the right place at the right time for whoever the commander is or the designated representative to make a decision? So it's a tough problem to solve. I think that we know that this is not necessarily experimental. We understand that this is the way we must operate in the Pacific. So inside the Core G6, our question then is, how do we apply the science of building a network to that art of decision making? And we're learning. We've gone through about 3 or 4 iterations, and we are about to move into a full-on warfighter exercise where we'll have the requisite stimulation for us to understand, have we gotten it right? We're in a process of building. The commander has assumed a lot of risk and has stated that this warfighter is for learning. That's what we're doing in the warfighter. And so we've invited a lot of partners to learn with us. I would say from a data centricity perspective, and I'll leave it there because there's much more we could say about the tactical network, I think the thing we look towards is data standardization. So the things that General Ray and Mr. Sachs talked about in terms of how data standardization is going to help us have a flatter, more unified network, allow us to provide security controls that are a little bit more centralized and take a lot of the lift and the burden off of the units that are operating at the tactical edge. We will always gate, guard, and censor. Block, screen, cover, defensive protocols. Those are all things that we need to do and provide information back to the enterprise on what we're seeing. All of those things will still occur, but once data standardization comes to play, we now start to flatten our network and move data across from node to node, which is critically important to us being able to operate under this distributed concept in the Pacific. I think that's all I have in terms of data centricity. Thanks.
Sure, appreciate that. So, Colonel Sanderson, I know Colonel Casey kind of alluded to some of this, but can you talk a little bit about specific challenges, obviously at the unclass level, specific to First Corps and the Pacific Theater that distributed C2 concept is trying to address, and maybe if there are some elements of that concept that could be applicable to other formations and theaters?
Yeah, sure. So specific to the Indo-Pacific theater, obviously it's just a really big theater, right? It's 52% of the Earth's surface. So operating from the west coast of the United States all the way to the eastern coast of the Asian continent, and beyond, actually, and includes the Indian subcontinent and all those environs. We have a transportation problem, and this is a physical transportation, not the network transport, because we'll talk about that later too. In crisis and contingency, as we've witnessed multiple times in the European AOR, the strategic lift is at a premium, right? So we don't self-deploy as a corps. We're big, we're a large formation. It's difficult to get us anywhere. General Brunson says it's over 100 C-17s to move the main. I will not dispute his numbers, but it's a lot. So we know we won't be able to get that. We won't even get a fraction of that during crisis or transitioning into conflict. As a part of Operation Pathways, we're capitalizing on the 20-plus exercises that First Corps supports west of the IDL every year, roughly over the course of an 8-month period, every year. We can have, using the exercises, the transportation available to the exercises, our nodes forward in support of multiple exercises all that time to provide that consistent presence, so it obviates the requirement for strat lift during crisis. Now, we may have to get individuals and TAT out to these different nodes to augment them. We purpose-build these nodes for the exercises with a little bit extra just in case they can shift to contingency, provide C2 options for the Indo-PACOM commander and the Eastern PAC commander. So we have tailored this approach, and we go into MDMP with specific intent of designing these nodes for every exercise. So just like we task organize our down trace to meet the mission requirements, we task organize our C2 to meet the mission requirements. And we look at this nodal construct sort of like through 6 lenses. We used to call them pillars. I know we keep modifying the names. And a lot of it has to do with the restrictions at the location, right? So sometimes host nation restricts us to 60 packs or 90 packs or 230 for the entire exercise. So we have to whittle down that piece that's going to be part of the C2 construct. That limits, obviously, what systems go forward. That limits, obviously, what life support has to go forward and protection. So we have to take that whole idea into the concept as we build our nodes going forward. Now, what this else does for us, right? We have other considerations in here. It's now more agile because we can move fairly rapidly smaller elements. We're restricting ourselves at the conceptual level to no more than 2 C-17s for inter-theater lift and then 5 C-130s for intra-theater lift. That's at the sort of optimal level for each node. So it's more agile. We believe it's more survivable because it's distributed. It's not a single one target that can be destroyed or not just destroyed. It could be a natural disaster. So there could, if it's just taken out of play in any way, shape, or form, then we are no longer mission capable. And then it's more resilient, obviously, for another reason for that is if you eliminate one of these nodes, you don't take us offline. We have this whole construct of a collective that will continue to provide mission command for the commander and for the Indo-PACOM commander and the Eastern PAC commander. So those are the big considerations we had, survivability, agility, and resiliency that we applied to this concept.
So I think similar to that multi-node approach, looking at a transport perspective, Colonel Taylor, Unified Network is obviously going to support the realization of this data-centric operations, but what are some of your efforts specifically to provide the resilient multi-path network transport, especially in a distributed environment?
Sure. So first of all, I do want to take a second and say thanks for everybody for coming. Thanks, FCA, for hosting. I've done several of these panels. I've actually never sat in the bottom of a classroom, though. I will tell you, I really feel bad for my professors if the looks on my face match some of y'all's right now. So, but anyways, I do thank you for coming today. Great opportunity for us to share some of both what we're looking at from a PM/PEO perspective. But I will tell you, take this opportunity. You guys get to see us a lot. You don't necessarily get to interact with folks like the operators here sitting to my left. So I would please take that opportunity to get real honest feedback from some of the challenges that we're seeing out in theaters today. So back to Justin's question. I want to take the opportunity to do two things real fast. Terms of reference are very important as we have some of these discussions. So one, I want to talk about how we're in PMT and how we're talking about and defining resilient, and then also what transport agnostic means to us. So first, from a resiliency perspective, the team I've tested with two really kind of focus areas with that. When we say resilient, one, we're talking about the ability to harden some of those waveforms, right? As we move forward on the existing waveforms that we have within the fleet, as well as some potential new ones. Are we incorporating those AJ capabilities? Are we continuing to harden those, as well as, we're all in on where we're going with PTW and the work that we're doing with the Space Force. There's going to be capacity challenges there. So all the other waveforms need to continue to move in that direction. And then secondly, from a resiliency perspective, we're talking about multi-path options, right? And that gets into that transport agnostic discussion that General Ray and Mr. Sachs were having earlier. So for me, transport agnostic means seamless to the user. I have my end user device, I plug it in, and signal gets from A to B, and it's all behind the scenes. One of our former engineers used to call that techno magic. And so what that means, though, is multi-path is whether it's a line of sight link, whether it's a beyond line of sight link, it's a fiber link, it's a SATCOM link, and then even within the SATCOM links, multi-band, multi-orbit. You put all that together, that gives you lots of opportunities to get message traffic through. All that said, one of the key tenets of where we want to go is simplification. So kind of key to underpinning the simplification of that transport agnostic capability are things like auto pace, where it's seamless to the user, it picks best path, even cross loads, and we're able to take advantage of each of those links. If I'm jammed, I can do a line of sight shot to somewhere else. Or if there's dirty fiber where I'm at, I can leverage that. We have the ability to IVPN through some of those capabilities. So anyways, that's what transport agnostic and resiliency mean to us within PMTN. As far as where we're going, you saw again, General Ray and Mr. Sachs talk about the CAPE sets. I think there's a unique opportunity within those CAPE sets for us to focus some of those deliveries. And so within 23, you're going to see some of the initial, we use the term high throughput, low latency. I don't get into orbits, but high throughput, low latency, because to me that's LEO, MEO. It's also high throughput GEO that's coming online. And the ability to leverage all of the above. So there's going to be, within the 23 timeframe, you'll see some of those are probably going to be ancillary to our existing kit. That's one of the challenges that we have, the 7029-1. There's over 260 units of kit out there right now, over 5,000 ground terminals. I'm not even counting the CSS SATCOM fleet. So there's a pretty substantial fleet out there that we got to maintain at the same time we're modernizing. And so our ability to simplify that and maintain that fleet at the same time is really dependent on things, like I said earlier about auto pace and some of those solutions that we're partnering with C5 ISR on the S&T side. So again, 23 is that. 25, we hope to see a lot more of that being integrated into our fleet, and so that's multi-orbit, multi-band terminals, and then other line-of-sight options that aren't so spectrum dependent, because spectrum continues to be a challenge within the line-of-sight formations. And then as you move into 27, if you're familiar with some of the C5 work on next-gen tactical terminal, where we get into multi-orbit, multi-band, all integrated, we want all this capacity, all this capability, but of course we want less kits for the users to have to haul around. You heard the discussion about how large the fleet is to move just for attack. And so I will tell you, so a lot of the new capabilities that are coming online, much smaller, lighter, faster, almost anything that's commercially available can be set up or torn down in under 30 minutes. And I think you'll see the investment from an industry perspective from 2018 to now has been pretty phenomenal in that arena. So just from a swap perspective, we're seeing a lot of improvement in some of that kit. So the goal there would be to enable some of that capability from a distributed ops and from ability to do reach back for cloud and things like that from a transport perspective. I think there's been tremendous opportunity there. So.
Thanks, Colonel Taylor. Pretty good snapshot on where you're headed from the transport side of things. But Colonel Paul, in that line of where you're headed, tactical data fabric is kind of one of the emerging critical capabilities to achieving data centricity. Can you talk a little bit about the Army's tactical data fabric and the strategy there, and any updates on that effort?
All right. Thanks, Justin. Well, good morning. Again, Colonel Matt Paul, PM Mission Command, thank you for being here. So I'm the tactical data fabric guy for the Army under PEO C3T. What I'm focused on right now is setting conditions for Project Convergence 22 and Capability Set 23. And my leadership here did a very good job setting the table for my pitch. I'm just going to build on what they've already stated and provide some details. So we're working very closely with our partners at USERPAC and kind of their down trace formations. We're also partnered very closely with R-Cyber, who's helping us solve some of our data problems and helping us do some creative things with some of the tools that they have, open source tools, services. They're helping us to set those conditions. And we refer to this work as tactical data fabric. In my mind, tactical data fabric needs to solve two gaps that we have in the Army. Number one, our ability to access data, especially our ability to access data from the tactical edge. General Ray in his pitch mentioned that broken line between the enterprise and the tactical. And there's certainly a data component to that. Commanders, they need access to more data, more authoritative data sources, most of which live in the enterprise space, live in the cloud, Army data centers, and they're persistent, in some cases, big data platforms that live on the DoDin. But if you're a tactical commander maneuvering on the battlefield, oftentimes those authoritative data sources are out of reach for one reason or another. It's either a network thing or it's a data thing. A lot of those authoritative data sources, believe it or not, we have challenges with data standardization in that space, to Colonel Casely's point. There's a lot of messy data in that space, semi-structured, unstructured data, and there's some incompatibilities there. So part of our tactical data fabric solution will be kind of bridging that divide between the enterprise and those authoritative data sources and the tactical space. And all of your tactical systems, your mission command systems that have to consume data to answer questions, to facilitate decision-making, sensor to shooter, all of that. That's gap number one that we're trying to get after with our tactical data fabric solution. Gap number two is data synchronization. The ability to synchronize data between formations and within your own formation, up and down and to the sides. If you're wearing a green suit in the audience today, you know that the way we do that today is quite antiquated. It's quite manual, it's clunky, and it's error prone. So we have to do better than that. And we are striving to do better than that with our tactical data fabric solution. We need to make data synchronization more seamless, more easy, and to some extent, more automated. And we think of our tactical data fabric solution as modular Lego blocks. That's how we look at it. It's not one big monolithic thing. It's a collection of specific tools, technologies, and in some cases, services that we would bring to bear to help a unit solve specific problems or to help commanders make decisions. Colonel Sanderson mentioned what I would describe as a contested logistics challenge. So challenged with geometry, time, space, we would look at ways to access data so I-Corps can have what we call in-transit visibility or asset visibility, so they can see where all of those assets are in their AOR, and to plug in analytics solutions that will allow them to make predictions about when those assets are going to arrive in the fight. I mean, that's pretty important, especially as the commander is trying to determine where can I mass my combat power? When can I transition from the defense to the offense? Data is going to help him or her make that decision. And that decision is going to require a collection of technologies. It's not one size fits all. It will depend on who our customer is and what specific challenges they're trying to get after in their fight. Right now we're building the Lego blocks, as I've stated, and we're trying to set a foundation that we're going to bring into Project Convergence 22, what I call a minimum viable capability, and we're going to take it out for a test drive. And it's a highly distributed environment. I know distributed mission command, distributed ops is one of the challenge areas that Colonel Casely mentioned. There's going to be a lot of distributed ops out there at PC22. And so we want to know where those gaps are. Where are those seams in our data fabric that we need to lash up? And then coming out of PC22, we'll make a determination, where do we need to invest based on those gaps? Are there certain Lego blocks that we need to improve? Are there Lego blocks that we need to replace, like wholesale? We don't know the answers to those questions yet, but we are pretty excited about the progress that's been made in just the last few months and the capability that we're going to bring to bear at PC22. Thank you.
Thanks, Colonel Paul. So, Nihar, Colonel Paul just kind of talked about the needs and some of the gaps there. Army S&T really has been instrumental in supporting kind of the early development of some of those efforts, data fabric tools and standards. And some of the data fabric programs are really already being integrated, but what do you see as kind of the next emerging capability needs or technology, as General Ray mentioned, that 1% that'll support that approach?
Thanks, Justin. So, as General Ray mentioned, we go by 4 pillars, right? Our transport agnostic, data-centric, modern security architecture, and SEMA dominance. Data-centric's kind of in the middle, right below transport agnostic, right above modern security architectures. I think there's some key investments that we can make in those two to support the tactical data fabric up to the enterprise. When we talk about data centricity in general, right, it's about 4 things: people, processes, technology, and governance. We need to enable the soldiers to make critical, actionable decisions based on trust-validated data. And it starts with data ownership, right? It's part of that governance process. Who owns the data? How is the privacy handled? How is least privilege determination made at the data owner level? We have 4 mission areas that are the primary data owners. They have to really set the bounds of how that data traverses, who needs it, what systems can access that data. And it is always about that governance process that we've already started and we need to continuously adjust. Second point is data integrity. How do we know that data has integrity, right? It has to be a service that ensures that the message's integrity has origin, chain of custody, as it traverses the network. Then we go into data traceability. Who, what, when, where, how was it originally put into the system or created? How is that data changed over time, and who has accessed that data? We need key investments in areas like blockchain. How do you use blockchain, based information flow protection to provide that data tracking, traceability of the message flow? And it comes back, to the attribute-based access control, role-based access control for data access permissions. Who should be able to access the data, metadata, under what circumstances, right? If you're at the tactical edge, you need to call for fires, all of a sudden you may not be able to even do so. How can we change those security rules dynamically? We have to utilize machine learning and other techniques to passively but continuously validate those logins, monitor, and alert on anomalous behavior. We have to use finely grained dynamic access control that reduces the burden of manually adding and removing privileges to users, those non-person entities, those end-user devices in these DIL environments. And then extend that enterprise ICAM, such as the Army Master Identity Directory and the Global Directory Services down to the tactical systems. I think we've all mentioned that here. And then when we're accessing the data, how do we trace back how machines arrived at specific data-driven decisions? When there's a course of action that's being presented to a commander, how do we continuously validate trust with a certain confidence level that that data was valid, it's not stale, and to make that informed decision? And then how do you organize your data? Maximizing that value to, again, commanders, the soldiers that are making the workflows, or even your algorithms itself. We have to make that data natively interoperable. I think that's the key theme here with standards, right, with machines and applications that reside within and outside our service. And those features there actually go to your zero trust principles and your modern security architecture. On top of it is our transport agnostic key pillar. As Colonel Taylor mentioned, right, allowing multiple communication transports to be used simultaneously. We want to have awareness of what devices are nearby and networking capabilities that they have available. And you have to use some type of continuous neighbor discovery to do so. And it's not vendor specific, right? We're looking at any and all available capabilities at all echelons, right? From the tactical or from the edge to the enterprise. What transport can I take? What's available? And then how do we use things like homomorphic, homogeneous encryption to secure that data? Homomorphic encryption, right, is one of those fundamental things right now that is computationally, it has a very high overhead for computational power. So do we do that in the cloud? How do we bring that overhead a little bit less down to the tactical user? Do we switch the three pillars, right, partially, somewhat, fully encrypted, as they traverse? Do we get rid of our security enclaves? Do we subset the security enclaves with these three stages? And that's what's going to provide our, or help us provide that quantum protection.
Thanks, Niyar. Appreciate it. So I think we've kind of danced around it a little bit, but something we really haven't dug into yet is cloud. So Mr. Sachs mentioned earlier, we're looking for kind of the right mix of cloud. So I'll kind of open it up to the whole panel here, but maybe from the I-Corps perspective first, how are you looking at cloud to enable persistent operations? And Colonel Paul, what are your thoughts on kind of that, maybe leveraging that building block approach to enable cloud-enabled mission command?
Oh, thanks, Justin, for the question. I appreciate it. Real quick before I move into cloud, because cloud really is there to enable what we're doing with data, I'd like to just circle back on some of the things that the panel members said. So one of the things that we believe at First Corps that we owe the enterprise who's working very hard to answer these questions is to work through our own process. Some of the things that you're asking here, you are requiring the warfighter to answer those questions for you. And so we've entered into a DevSecOps agreement with the PM Mission Command in order to figure out how we start to iterate very rapidly as we're learning, using both our legacy systems and to pivot off of something that General Ray said, understanding how much we still need to train on optimizing the systems that we do have in hand today, which ones we don't have a use for anymore, and then figuring out how we pivot to things like cloud computing environment. And so that was one of the points I wanted to make on data centricity, which is that we believe and we understand inside First Corps that we owe you those types of answers in order for you to inform your designs, and then iteratively we'll work back and forth to figure out how best to optimize it for specific environments that we might want to operate in. As we look towards designing a network that builds this out, we have sort of broken it down into three parts. To make it simple, when I'm speaking to folks inside the Corps, we break it down by transport, which we had a long discussion just now about transport agnostic solutions and things that we're looking towards. We are looking to employ all of those, looking towards automated pace, et cetera, looking to use all of the systems that we have in existence today to include HF. Things like that will be significantly, incredibly important in the Pacific. And when I talk about transport, we really talk about it as a road to get to a library in which we are calling a persistent information environment. Persistent information environments are nothing new. Division G6s and core G6s have been setting that up for a lifetime. It makes things very simple. Once we deploy out and able to connect back, we have some inherited routing that we're able to use and very quickly scale up and then be able to start performing operations. What is new today is cloud computing capability. And so that allows us to access cloud native capabilities, which really increases the amount of resources, technical resources, that we're able to use in order to potentially get after things like data fabric that is also potentially connected to other data sources, authoritative data sources, which can very quickly, with speed, which is something is being discussed in this conference today, with speed, help the commanders to make decisions. Today in First Corps, we have gotten ourselves into the hyperscale. We've begun to experiment with that. One of the reasons why I brought up transport and us being able to be transport agnostic is because what we discovered very quickly is that we are not working with the enterprise to make sure that we're setting up express routes and potentially using some of the infrastructure that's available in the architecture. We are setting ourselves up for failure by just as a tactical unit trying to connect to our cloud presence. So we experienced that in an exercise recently, learned a lot of lessons from that. But in the interim, we also learned how those cloud resources can be used and peered very easily with our legacy systems. And so what's unique about that is that once we set up a persistent information environment, And we have the express routes and transport agnostic roads to travel to that library, which our persistent information environment resides. It doesn't matter now, come as you are. Something like a 3-star headquarters operating inside the Pacific AOR is able to receive Compo 2, Compo 3 units, doesn't matter what legacy system you have, TSI, BCCS stacks. Come, connect in, receive information, and then start getting to work. Data standardization is going to be key to that, but as we look towards that, we will continue to inform the enterprise on what we require for data, how we're making decisions, when we're making it, the timing of it, where it needs to be, what is required for that, and then how we start to do security on that, because security needs to be baked into it. I think as we move forward with taking a look at our cloud environment, what we would look to employ is probably something of, we'd like to see microservices employed inside of a cloud environment. We know that that is not necessarily optimally in existence today, but as we move forward, we'd like to, as a bridge, probably start with infrastructure as code. And when we start to build out these environments and deploy these native capabilities and work with industry partners on some of the best practices that you've used, taking a look at how we actually deploy workloads in a way that's a little bit more optimized than just lifting and shifting and establishing VMs inside of our cloud resources. And then make use of those to inform decision-making once again as we start to build out our tactical data fabric in conjunction with the PM. So that's how the core is using cloud resources today. And there's many more iterations to occur, because as we start to unpack this, we now start to realize that potentially looking at mission command as a service, right, each core operates differently. So how can we quickly apply resources to our own very unique configuration, particularly if we're operating in the distributed mode, and then quickly connect to other environments using what we have today as we get ready to make most of our mission command applications, and I know there's a road to doing that, cloud native.
Okay, well, to build off of Colonel Casely's response, you heard her say that every core operates differently, and that is a fact. Their mission sets are different. The AOR that they're aligned to is different, right? So I am not looking at tactical data fabric as a one-size-fits-all solution, because it's not going to fit. It's going to be a square peg in a round hole in some cases. So we're trying to be as agile, modular, and extensible as possible. So we think of things like cloud as just another Lego block. And I-Corps is either going to use that Lego block or they're not. 18th Airborne Corps is going to use it or they're not. It's going to depend on their mission, and it's going to depend on those decisions that need to be made. Again, you heard, so I-Corps, it starts with the decisions, right? If we're going to be data-centric as an Army, that's where it needs to start, right? And then we determine what data do we need to support those decisions. What are the data types, formats, and then where do we get the data? Is it from an authoritative data source? Are we going to generate it ourselves at the edge? And it will depend on the mission, and it will depend on the unit and their tactics, techniques, and procedures. And then working backward from there, we then determine, okay, what analytics solutions are we going to bring to bear to make sense of all of that data? Things like predictive analytics, implementing artificial intelligence, machine learning solutions that will help answer those questions or make those decisions. And then my personal view, I think the last thing we should think about is, like, what are those transport options available to us? What are those infrastructure dependencies, i.e. cloud or edge computing? That shouldn't be the first thing that we think about when we're thinking about new missions and solving hard problems. So that all being said, I would say we're in phase one of understanding cloud employment. And as a material developer guy, I'm not an employment guy. I just provide the stuff. But it's important that the stuff that I provide is aligned to what the operational units actually need. And so I think what you heard Colonel Casely mention was they're doing a lot of experimentation and they're learning a lot of things. And we are partnered with I-Corps, USERPAC, and other formations out there. And we're collecting all of this information and we're like feeding it back into the acquisition collective to generate, investment decisions and things of that nature to make sure that we are aligned to the future.
So one more point I wanted to bring up, which I think is critically important. I often get the question about distributed nodes and how that is any different from a main TAC rear. It is very different I'll let Adam answer from an operational perspective, but from a technical perspective, it is very different because the way the Mission Command information systems are designed, they are designed to exist in a LAN environment in a server client infrastructure. When we start to break out these Mission Command systems separately, especially by warfighting function. I'll take the protection warfighting function, it's one of my favorites, and it distributed across 4 different nodes, and then understand what type of information is being generated in that particular domain, what applications, et cetera, all the way down to the data layer, and then how that is being coalesced into something for usable information to tee up decision making. Now that really starts to put a tax on our WAN. And the WAN is not necessarily designed to handle that constant chatter across it. And so as we work with PM Mission Command on these Mission Command information systems, cloud-based capability is going to help us at least slightly, while we start to optimize it, figure out how to reduce that taxing on our WAN. So that's one of the things I wanted to quickly talk about. And then from a transport perspective, this understanding of the pace, we expect that the information that comes from First Corps will be dynamic. When we talk about a pace, I don't think about it linearly. First this, then that, then this, then the next one. It's like a PACE. By node, you would probably have different transport mechanisms. What information actually needs to be transmitted by node? If the node is the one that is pushing out the decision, right, transmitting the decision for action, perhaps it pushes it out many different mechanisms to other nodes in order for them to receive that information and then start to take action. This is something, again, that we're still working through with the Corps, because when you start to walk down a transport pace, it automatically moves you towards a services pace. Your services that you're using on each of those transport mechanisms might be different, and then how you receive the information will also be different too as well. The battle drills that are associated with each of those pace mechanisms will start to drive some information. Again, like I said, during the next 2 months as we go through our CPX and our warfighter exercise, we hope to learn a ton there. I'm sure it'll be an exciting event.
I just want to couch on the transport discussion. So from an industry perspective, I would ask, as we move forward, I think Liz hit on a great point, right? So when we talk about pace, I think historically we talk about, primary, alternate, et cetera. We kind of got to get away from that paradigm and think, it's got to be ubiquitous. I think you saw that earlier, right? It's got to be to where we may have those from a QoSing type of perspective, but at the end of the day, cloud, there's a huge, obviously, discussion on where we're going to host cloud, and especially when we get into these deal environment discussions. And so transport obviously becomes a huge part of that as we remove some of these, heavier stacks from the edge. But that transport agnostic solution that we talk about cannot be kind of a linear progression. Hey, if this goes down, I can do here. If this goes down, I can move to this. It's got to be completely seamless. And it's not just the Mission Command systems. It is the ERPs. It is all the other systems that are out there. And so again, from the transport side, things like, how we do security and how we do data integrity, obviously that's tremendously important to us, because quite honestly, if we can get out of the securing the network piece and secure the data, that opens up that paradigm to, even more transport options. But I think from an industry perspective, if you guys are out there, you're light years ahead of us as far as the implementation on the commercial side. But so if you've got ideas on, opportunities to kind of get after that. We're still working through what I-Corps is doing will help us kind of inform maybe some ideas on where we want to host, as well as how we truly want to optimize that agnostic transport approach to getting after that, so we don't break those links.
So Colonel Casely, you kind of alluded to, your battle drills and your exercises. How are you working the distributed C2 kind of concept into the exercise plans, and really for the rest of the group here too? How are you delivering feedback, whether it's from those exercises or experimentation, to kind of the broader Army network and modernization community?
I think I'm going to punt this one to Colonel Sanderson. Yeah.
So we have a multi-year plan to get after this. We think after Warfighter, we'll have a pretty good baseline to consider ourselves, I wouldn't even say IOC, but initially IOC, if you will.
Aware.
Because we have the number of exercises we have forward, we have this tremendous opportunity to experiment with this at distance and at scale. So we can do this. So we have essentially once a quarter, the Corps headquarters will be established in this distributed fashion, conducting operations. At the end of FY23, we'll be executing Talisman Sabre in Australia. We'll be operating with, I believe, 2 nodes in Australia, which, if you're not tracking, it's kind of a big place. And then also additional nodes in Indonesia and Japan. So we're going to get after it in that where we believe by that point we'll have set ourselves as at our initial operational capability. Shooting forward to the end of 24, beginning of 25, where we hit Warfighter 25-1, we hope to test this again and establish ourselves as fully operational in this concept. So take your pick. We've got Yamasakura happening in December. We've got CCPT and Salak Nib in March. We've got Pac Sentry, Talisman Sabre, Southern Jackaroo. We have tons of exercises that we have the opportunity in the Indo-PACOM AOR to execute. And so, part of our dynamic duo campaign of informing the enterprise is, hey, we're out there. If you want to see if something is working, come visit us while we're doing it. We're not trying to be secret about it at all. What we have not done as well is capturing our lessons learned or lessons observed, as the deputy commander likes to point out, back to the enterprise to say, hey, we tried this did not work, or this was a catastrophic success, and that's what we owe back to the enterprise, and in a very disciplined fashion.
So I just have one more caveat to that. I will say that we have not necessarily provided lessons learned back to the enterprise in a disciplined fashion, but where we have with partners, we see immediate change. And so this setting up these express routes, right, over to the RH end in order to have cloud connectivity, that comes directly from feedback that we provided coming out of Grover Gold, which was in February. And so that's phenomenal because we learned that we can't just connect to the cloud however we want to, whenever we want to. And working with your team, we've seen success. And so I think we need to do more of that. The second thing that I will say for industry partners that are out there, they're interested in figuring out how to work with this team of teams, is we are taking a disciplined approach and working very exclusively right now, I think, on process inside of the Corps. The process by which we execute this distributed operation, and then figuring out how to get as much experience with it, as Adam just alluded to, with the several different exercises that we have each quarter, as well as using that experience to be very innovative and then figure out how we provide information back. As we work through process to optimize what we have, it is incredibly important that folks come in because you will see use cases there to say, hey, there are technologies that exist that can make your life easier. As an example, simple automation of things that we are doing in a manual manner that might free up some cognitive time and resources so that we can apply our technicians to different parts of the problem that we're trying to solve. And so this is the very dynamic, interactive, integrative, collaborative sort of teaming that we want to do towards distributed operations.
Okay, thank you. So for my foxhole, there are really two feed pipes for how to roll feedback into Army processes, requirements, and material solutions. I think number one, probably my favorite, is working directly with the units. We have what's called these DevOps agreements or Devops partnerships with a representative sample of total Army formations to make sure we've captured feedback at the right echelon, in the right unit. Again, every unit functions a little bit differently. And what we do is we provide those units with kind of the new stuff. They take it out for a test drive, and we get feedback, and then we roll that feedback into our material solution. But if it's something bigger than that, then it generally drives new requirements that will enable us to start something new. That's my favorite approach, and probably my second favorite would be kind of going the formal route, where sometimes units will write a capability needs statement, and that's kind of up and around through the Army leadership, where these things get discussed in terms of what is this new thing, how is it tied to current or future requirements, future strategic modernization priorities, and then guidance comes back down in the form of, hey, we need either do nothing, or hey, you need to write new requirements, or we need to put this in the next POM. So there's a formal and an informal route by which we absorb, the Army and my office absorbs feedback from the units out there, doing great things and learning a lot.
So I just want to pull the thread on one of Matt's comments about the soldier touch points, because that's been I think a lot of folks are tracking that, but that's been a pretty big paradigm shift over the last couple of years. And really what you're seeing is, and I'll pick on the ESBs because I think that's a perfect example, because we just did a fielding to a Compo 2 unit in Delaware. And what you're seeing is, as new technologies become available, we used to be predominantly developmental in nature, right? Requirement 2 to 3 years, thrown over the fence. We did a development effort with a vendor 3, 4, 5 years, and then in the field 7 years later, you had a technology from 5 years ago, right? So what we're trying to do now is really let what's commercially available drive a lot of the approaches that we're taking. So to both Liz and Matt's point, as we identify opportunities, as we identify gaps, we're going out there, getting a hold of some of that commercial kit, put it in the hands of soldiers, collect that data. That is absolutely being given and fed back into the enterprise, and it informs things like design goals coming out of the CFTs. It informs requirements that are constantly being looked at with our ACOMs and the next generation of those requirements documents. But more importantly, it actually gives us real-time feedback from the soldiers of what works and what doesn't work. And we can look at a commercial piece of kit and go, wow, that really looks like it'll solve a problem. We give it to the soldier and they use it completely different than how we thought they would use it, right? So that's really good feedback. But we also, from those fieldings, so Matt talked about a couple ways that we get that feedback. As we field, we collect the feedback. So I think the ESBs, that was concept to fielding in under 24 months. Obviously, there was growing pains because of that. The unit is now part of that feedback loop, as opposed to, everything's locked, the POI, the program instructions locked, everything's dress right dress, and we show up, we field, we net nef, and then we run away to the next unit. Now it's almost a continuous feedback loop. So as we field that unit, we're receiving data from them. We use that to inform the solution for the next unit, and we continue to iterate, right? This is no longer we buy something and we field it for the next 10 to 15 years, because in this environment, the technology just, it changes too much for us to do that. If you looked at the programs within the Army right now, it's like I think it's around 80% have some kind of network equity in them. By 2030, 97% of the Army programs will have some kind of equity with the network, right? So what we're talking about here today influences across Army weapon systems, right? So it becomes extremely important that we aren't, we don't sit on our laurels. We don't, congratulate ourselves for a great capability, and we're already, looking at the next solution. So again, it's continuous feedback is a key part of that, and our ability to be flexible and take in that feedback is just as important. Do our processes support it? Can we make changes on the fly? We have these things called JROC requirements documents that used to be gospel, and you had to go all the way back up to the DAE at the OSD level to make a change. There are now processes in place that don't require us to do all that level of to do that level of change. So, thanks.
So before our last and final $1 million question, I do want to mention, if you're here from industry and you haven't already registered for the TEM with that information up the whole time, I think you're a little behind the 8 ball. But Nihar, I'm going to kind of have you kind of open it up. Colonel Taylor, you just kind of outlined that future look ahead. So from the S&T side, looking at some AI, ML capabilities, predictive analytics, what would those capabilities bring to the table? And really to the rest of the panel, how will emerging commercial capabilities enable that more distributed and survivable operations?
Thanks, Justin. So in the S&T realm, right, we have a couple of efforts to kind of get after this. Data is only valuable if it's found, right, and available. So, I go back to the transport layer. We need at the edge, across from tactical edge to the enterprise, right? We need extremely high bandwidth communications. We're looking at technologies in the 5G space, free space optics, terahertz, putting those technologies in the air, right? Aerial tier platforms, whether it be a UAS or a high altitude balloon. But we're really trying to currently looking at 5G, XG communications to increase that robustness and capacity, to develop just communications devices suitable for air and ground. Looking at developing network slicing and its framework and network glue functions for resources in order to create the multiple independent end-to-end virtualized logical networks over our unified tactical network. Right, the realization of these service-oriented views will leverage concepts from software-defined networking, network function virtualization, and provide that network programmability. That aerial tier networking, as you may have heard before from us, right, it's intended to thicken the terrestrial comms, utilizing those aerial platforms as relays to ensure communications coverage is maintained in those non-line-of-sight environments. In the Indo-PACOM region, right, we have the tyranny of space and time. We're really looking, actually for industry's help as well, for long-range, high-bandwidth communications, right? I think in a different setting, Colonel Casey did show the distances, and they're far greater than we probably anticipate. And how can we deploy these technologies in that area to really have full reach back as they're in transit in time? We want to really add that artificial intelligence to that automated pace, right? That framework, it's a decision-making engine, deliver that proactive network capability that's resilient to adversarial, EW, and cyber attacks. It has to be enabled with that artificial intelligence. We have to autonomously identify, learn, and predict, react to the changes in the network operating conditions and threats, ensure that end-to-end resiliency against those AI-driven electronic attacks, electronic warfare, and cyber attacks. From the security standpoint, right, we're adopting those traditional cryptographic-based technologies to protect transmissions and stored information on legacy classical computing platforms. This will include upgrades to the suite of transmission and data at rest systems in the interim as we move towards that homomorphic encryption. And then developing those quantum-safe public key infrastructure certificates. Now, we do have, in the S&T world, a tactical advanced analytics framework. It it is a blueprint that's going to deliver those analytics to ensure a commander, right, at any operational echelon to achieve the tasks across the network, including all the warfighting functions. How we do that is we start with our tactical data fabric, right, that data distribution and synchronization service. We extract it from the data persistence and interoperability layer, right, that includes our tactical cloud. Now we're able to use data as a service and provide those analytics, right, for courses of action, replanning, aerospace deconfliction, right, weapon target pairing, and then feed that into applications itself for planning effects and things that Colonel Casey mentioned where it's predictive maintenance, right? We're trying to maximize our code and reuse and interoperability, future-proof that rapid development and integration, and this provides that framework where industry can provide their analytics based upon our base layer of tools. I'll just stop there. How about that?
Okay, so I think we do have some time for audience Q&A, again, not just for the panel here, but also for General Ray and Mr. Sachs. Look forward to answering as many as you guys have in the next 15 minutes or so.
Good morning, and thank you. Great panel discussion, a whole lot of information. Yep, thank you. John Toma, Palantir. The question is mainly one of framing and convergence, I believe primarily for Colonel Paul, and that is, after hearing the talk about requirements development for UNO over the course of time, I get the idea that there are incremental improvements made to Lego blocks over the course of time, and the question really is, are the experiences that you're learning and gaining, including from core feedback, driving the requirements that are going into UNO? Is it the other way around, kind of how is this all coming about and what we're going to be seeing ultimately?
So I will tell you from a requirements perspective, yes, they're doing RDPs, but from a requirements perspective and how we shape and inform those, absolutely. General Ray talked about going to UCOM and the data that we collected there, what ICOR is doing. The ACOMs, as we talk about the enterprise and we talk about the team of teams approach that we're taking, the ACOMs are a part of that, right? The CFT is key players with that. And so I would tell you all of those are being informed by exercises, real-world deployments, and pilots and experimentation. So, and quite frankly, market research with what's out there available commercially today, right? So again, we're trying to stay away from, as much as possible, developmental capabilities, just one, because of the cost, two, because of the time. And quite frankly, commercially, there's options that are probably out there to help, solve some of those problems. So, but yeah, I would argue, all of the above are informing and shaping those requirements as we move forward. And quite honestly, I've seen it over the last couple of years, specifically with AFC, two big shifts. One, I've been very impressed with the shift in the S&T base and where their projects are much more aligned with where we see gaps on the PM side. And then secondly, I've seen a lot more involvement from an ACOM community that's historically under-resourced, and they have been much more involved in collecting data from these exercises and these soldier touch points and been very responsive to making changes to those documents based off of things that we learned. Again, I think the soldier touch points that we've been doing, they've been a part of that, and they take that feedback right back into the requirements documents. Things like, for me, things like throughput and range requirements, right? We go out there, we see what's commercially available, we use that to shape the performance specs within the requirements documents.
So, and on the back end, just process-wise, every Army service component command gets to vote on these requirements before they get approved, right? The RDP for data fabric or ICAM or whatever, it's not gonna advance if USERPAC or USERAP has objections or they want to add something, these things get adjudicated, and it's very collaborative. And then documents, requirements that go all the way up through the joint staff, it's kind of the same thing. Every COCOM gets a look at it. There's 3 layers of discussions that happen before those requirements are firmed up. So it's a lot of discussion that happens on the front end, and there's a bit of discussion that happens kind of on the back end of the process as well.
That was a long way to say yes.
Yes, short answer is yes.
For both of us, yes.
Okay, we'll go over here on the right-hand side first.
Yeah, Brett Reister from Trace. This is kind of a coalition MPE type of question for you. I was curious, how's the network CFT, PEO C3T, and PM Mission Command kind of, addressing these the multiple coalition network requirements that we see out there, that and also combined with this kind of requirement for the overall infrastructure convergence that we see. So the warfighter is not really just taking more equipment and more gear out to the field to meet those MPE requirements. How are you guys getting after that? Over.
So let me start with one that we're working on. Good question, Brett. Appreciate it. So I'll tell you from my perspective, what I'm trying to work on from the network cross-functional team is that our JCEL, the Joint Systems Integration Lab at Aberdeen Proving Ground, we're trying to build out a persistent connection from an MPE perspective. So that's really where we're trying to get after it. I know that the PEO, they're working on a different approach. And then I'll tell you finally, the part that we're working with is with the COCOMs on creating that mission partner environment connection throughout, where we use identity management, attribute-based access control, and credentialing to get after it. And I'll turn it over to my team too.
Right, and to piggyback off of General Ray, it's, we're taking a look at our data, even in a cloud environment with cell-based security, right? And then adding those attributes for both classification or incomplete classification, right, rel 2, and marking it appropriately, and then seeing how we can distribute that in an MPE environment. When you go multi-cloud, hybrid cloud, we have to have that strong ICAM to ensure that we meet our zero trust principles and we're able to disseminate information. I think CENTCOM has done a great job currently to exemplify that. There's work at 25th ID that we're looking at those zero trust principles with existing capability. There was a second part to your question. I apologize.
Yeah, it was the infrastructure convergence piece, so that not taking more gear out to the field to meet MPE and coalition network requirements. This is kind of currently what we're doing.
Yeah, so I will say, spot on, right? If we can get to the data centricity piece of this, we can get out of the enclave business and not carry around multiple enclaves. From a transport perspective, same thing, right? If we can get to truly colorless, I don't have to carry, that has a kit reduction. If we can get to efforts within the C5 center that are working on the next-gen tactical terminal, where I can get multi-orbit, multi-band, then I don't have to carry as much kit around with that. So all of the above, I think, that we're focused on is getting after what you're talking about is one, whether it's coalition partners, whether it's civil response, whoever it is, our ability to tag at the data level and use identity management as a security feature, that would get us out of quite a bit of different challenges with CDSs. It would get us out of the challenges with, again, all the extra kit associated with carrying around multiple enclaves, and from a transport perspective, obviously a tremendous impact as well there.
Okay, I think I saw another question in the middle in uniform, sir.
Good morning, good afternoon. Danny Morrison, 3IDG6. Tools currently being fielded by our PMs for conducting cyber defense on our tactical systems are different from the tools being used for our strategic networks and systems. As we look towards unified network operations, are there currently any efforts or plans to change the tools fielded to defend our tactical systems to match those that we are using on the enterprise side?
Yeah, I would say there are certainly some nuances between kind of the tactical DCO infrastructure and kind of the enterprise DCO infrastructure. Part of that is because the environment and the scale and the scope of the threats are quite different, or at least nuanced between those two environments. I'd say under the hood, though, there is a lot of commonality. We work directly with our sister PEO, IES. We actually share a lot of licenses and tools and stuff like that. But kind of the user-facing experience is probably a little bit different for some of the reasons that I mentioned. I do see more of a convergence that's going to happen as part of the unified network transition. And again, what we're trying to do in the software world is to be a lot more modular. So to deliver you capability as microservices that you can, plug and play. You either take it and use it for your mission or you don't, as opposed to giving you this monolithic thing that you're stuck with and you can't customize it. So that's part of our future as well, is to give the units a little bit more ability to be able to plug and play and then to customize what you have on your own, like user-defined dashboards, user-defined analytics based on your specific mission needs. That's across all of my product lines, that's where we're trying to go.
So the one point that I would add to that is that unified network operations and taking a look at the tools we're using, even if we move into microservices, is incredibly important for, I will talk just specifically about the Pacific Theater. So as we do fully flushed out network operations or DOTN operations, all the way from the tactical edge up to the TNCC, the ability to use tools that are compatible is an absolute necessity. And so as we start to iterate our process within distributed C2, distributed operations through each of our exercises, and we are using the resource which we now have, which is the 22nd Signal Brigade, which provides that capability, we would look to work with your team to do that. The second thing that I would add is, so I had a point, but I forgot what it is, so I'll just stop there.
So I will say, if you've heard General Morrison speak lately about that exact topic, one of the changes that you've seen over the last couple of years is historically we tried to take an enterprise tool and jam it down into the deal environment to limited success at times. So we really kind of flipped that script and really we're looking at what maximizes capability at the edge, and then can we scale that up to the enterprise? And that's been a little bit more of a change over the last couple of years. So now there is that sweet spot where some don't scale, and then there's obviously some unique requirements in each of those environments. But where possible, we have sought to maximize commonality. Did that help generate the second idea? Good.
So again, all of these tools, systems, the network, they don't exist onto themselves, and they are designed to support the warfighter. And so inside of the core, one of the things we're looking at is not just passive network defense and doing gate guarding, censoring. Something looks bad, let's make sure that it's not this, that, or the other. But we're looking at a systems process integrated with our G2, which is threat informed, the G39, which has IO, SEMA, PSYOPs. How do we create a process And I know that we don't often have the opportunity to get a really good workout with the simulation and the stimulation. We did a year ago when we did a multi-domain operation in Forager, where we had the multi-domain task force there with us. And then how do you start some reporting? What is something that was just inherent to the network and really doesn't need to go much further? How do I, as a G6, work with my partner in the G3, the G33, to report something that we're seeing on the network? Should it just be observed? Should it be considered? How does that impact operations? How does that impact decisions being made in operations, transitions along even the competition continuum, or as we have inflection points in crisis and conflict? Those are the things that we are working through in our process right now, and something as simple as a tool that allows us to see more, inform more, and be a little bit more predictive, analytic in our assessment of what's happening on the network and what it means to the operation is incredibly important. Thank you.
Okay, I did see one more hand in the back as well, and we might have time for one more after that.
Good afternoon. Hello. Good afternoon. My name is Sohail Baramazad from Hughes. Regarding the data centricity, both General A and Mr. Sachs talked about the importance of data identity management. The other part being transport security. And from an acquisition point of view, and without getting into the weeds, there's still some requirements in there for things like TransSec, which there's nobody really can agree on what that really means. So from a point of view of limiting the acquisition process, and in this world of modernization, are there thoughts of expanding that criteria and overlooking it?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So obviously from a data centricity point, if we get there, we can get truly colorless. We don't have to necessarily tackle this via just only network security because of the overhead associated with it. Absolutely. Specific to your question, I will tell you there's been some back and forth within the community on is TransSec, the definition of TransSec within the DoD channels and what that means to a commercial provider. There's definitely trade space there. There's opportunities. We're working with our cyber and others to, to see if there's some commercial equivalencies to TransSec. And because to your point, we don't want that to be a limiting factor. Is it in the documents now? Absolutely. Are we doing things like endpoint security, TransSec, IVPN or VPN, all of the above because of the current environment in EUCOM especially? Absolutely. There's been 5 years ago we were focused on availability. Now we're really focused on security. But that all comes with overhead. And so there's definitely an appetite for those discussions moving forward is commercial equivalencies to some of those security requirements.
Okay, I know I saw another hand, but I think we're out of time. So by all means, feel free to come down and chat with the panel here for a few minutes as we wrap up. But huge thanks to our panelists here for taking time out of their busy schedules here, both the First Corps and the PMs and the S&T side with the CFT. Hope you guys got a lot out of it. Again, if you haven't already registered for the TEM, please do so, and we'll see you in Nashville in December. Thanks.
All right, hey, real quick before we hustle out, I know I'm the only thing between you and lunch. First, I want to thank Mr. Sachs and General Ray for the keynote opening to set the stage for this awesome panel with Justin Eimers, Colonel Casely, Colonel Sanderson, Colonel Taylor, Colonel Paul, and Mr. Patel. It was excellent to hear about the network modernization and data centricity for the Army of 2030. And that's an Air Force guy saying all that Army stuff there. Pretty good, huh? But thanks. And in lieu, again, of a speaker gift, we're going to make a donation to the Fort Gordon Historical Museum Society on behalf of the panel. This definitely concludes the morning session of the PEO, but there are others this afternoon at 2:45 with two presentations from PEO, IEWNS. And then also later on, back at the Marriott, there's lunch that goes until 13:30, 1:30, and then we'll have Lieutenant General Xavier Brunson the commanding general of the First Corps, will be speaking in Oglethorpe at 1:30. So thank you for your attendance today, and again, thanks to the panel and the keynotes. How about another round of applause for fantastic?